It is the aftermath of another brutal containment breach. Buildings are shattered, cars thrown aside like toys, and the streets are stained with blood. As you'd expect from an SCP-096 incident, there are no bodies. Nothing. No trace of the people who moments ago were screaming, desperate to escape, as a monstrous white being came barreling into their village, a shrieking fury that no one could escape. Determining the exact body count in the aftermath of this rage-fueled massacre would take time. When the Foundation Mobile Task Force arrived, equipped with scramble goggles and anti-memetic training, they didn't need precise numbers to see the scale of horror. They could easily estimate from the decimated village that it was in the hundreds. And in the middle of all the carnage, the Shy Guy huddled down, covered its face with its spindly hands, and weeping loudly. It never seemed to gain any kind of gratification from the carnage that it brought, but that didn't make it any less horrifying. This time, the thing that triggered the horrors was a GoPro snowboarding video, recorded years ago before SCP-096 was ever contained. The snowboarder in question had unearthed the video and was editing it for a YouTube video when they noticed a strange, spindly figure in the back of the footage. The rest was history. The SCP Foundation and the human race as a whole were ultimately lucky that the snowboarder didn't survive long enough to post that video. They could have been looking at a true mass casualty event. As was standard procedure at this point, a black bag was pulled over SCP-096's head, and the beast was gently ushered into the belly of a Chinook helicopter. From there, it would be returned to Site-19 and locked into its hermetically sealed metal cube. One of the attending scientists, Dr. Ector, always thought it was funny that the walls were metal. They might as well be styrofoam or cardboard, because whenever SCP-096 was sighted outside containment and breached, the material that compromised its chamber was irrelevant. Nothing would stop it from destroying the object of its rage and hatred. Nothing. Killing the monster wasn't an option. Dr. Daniels still sat in a humanoid containment chamber, endlessly devising different methods he hoped would put the monster to rest. It was a privilege that he forsook his own life to earn. Yet despite countless attempts, SCP-096 stood untouched, not a scratch. But Dr. Ector thought in a different way. He knew that trying to kill the Shy Guy was a futile gesture, but at the same time, they needed a more permanent solution for its murderous ways. Otherwise, they were just buying time until it inevitably escaped again and caused even more bloodshed. One thing that Dr. Daniels was correct on, Dr. Ector thought, was that every death that happened while 096 was under the Foundation's care was also the Foundation's responsibility. But how could they neutralize 096's threat without killing it? Ector had racked his brain for months, pushing himself to the edge of a stress-induced breakdown. He felt like a live wire, tense, dangerous, ready to snap at the smallest things. When his superiors noticed this tension, they approved him for an hour with SCP-999, just to reduce his stress to more manageable levels. When Dr. Ector entered the chamber of the legendary and beloved Tickle Monster, he was skeptical. That was until the creature immediately swamped him with a chorus of soft coos and giggles. He felt his frustration, his rage, his resentment all melt away. It was as though a warm, lapping wave of pure joy, pure euphoria washed over him. He'd entered the room a raw bag of jangling, hard-edged nerves, and now he felt a sense of zen, of serenity. He honestly felt a profound sense of regret that he'd never booked a session with the little blob of sunshine earlier. 999 slithered over to him, and he gave the adorable gelatinous creature a gentle pat. It was a being of pure, unselfish goodness, completely benevolent to its very core. He gained some faith in the goodness of the world just from his brief interaction with it. But he also gained something else, a new idea. The next day, Dr. Ector submitted a bold new cross-test proposal to the site director, which quickly escalated up to the O5 Council. He wanted to cross-test SCP-096 with SCP-999, a suggestion that immediately raised eyebrows and rattled nerves across the Foundation. After the incident with Dr. Daniels and the staggering number of lives it claimed, any researcher showing unusual interest in SCP-096 was viewed with suspicion. Another reason for Dr. Ector's superior's apprehension was SCP-999's importance? Unknown to Ector, the highest ranks of the SCP Foundation knew of the Davite prophecy surrounding SCP-999. If the ancient legends held any truth, 999 was rumored to be one of the many spawn of the Scarlet King, an entity so dangerous that even the Foundation struggled to contain the scope of its influence. But according to prophecy, 999 would play a pivotal role in humanity's last hope against the Scarlet King on the prophesized Day of Reckoning. As such, placing SCP-999 into a test with a potentially deadly anomaly always presents a risk. Dr. Ector argued that measures could be put in place to limit potential risk to SCP-999. He also poured through the case files relating to SCP-999 and SCP-096 cross-tests of the past. SCP-999 handily survived an encounter with SCP-682, whereas when SCP-096 encountered 682, it was irreparably traumatized by the experience. The odds were in the favor of this cross-test going in 999, and, by extension, Dr. Ector's favor. The Shy Guy's head was securely bagged, and it was led into a cross-testing chamber while wearing heavy-duty scramble goggles. From there, SCP-999 was introduced to the chamber, and the experiment commenced. Dr. Ector wanted the two to remain in the chamber for an entire week, where 999 was given small stipends of Skittles and M&Ms to keep it pacified. For the first 2 days, SCP-096 was typically docile, crying and weeping. However, on day 3, SCP-096 fell eerily silent. The only sound coming from inside the chamber was the babbling and cooing of SCP-999 as it slithered up and down the Shy Guy's emaciated body. This was already strange enough, but by the time they reached day 6, things got even stranger. Typically, the Shy Guy remained oblivious to the world when not in his terrifying rage state, triggered by the mere sight of its face. But today he seemed to be developing an awareness. With the bag still over his head, he reached out, slowly, deliberately, and gently clasped SCP-999. Cradling the creature in its hands, SCP-999 offered no resistance, resting calmly in his hold. The observers were silent, transfixed. They had never seen SCP-096 like this. It was so uncharacteristically gentle. Was this the same monster they had seen slaughter hundreds upon hundreds of people so thoroughly that there was literally no trace remaining? 24 hours after this bizarre development, the experiment officially came to an end. SCP-999 was extracted from the cross-testing chamber, leaving only a still and docile SCP-096 with the bag on its head. Dr. Ector now had everything to prove, and he made a shocking decision, going into the room to remove the bag from the creature's head himself. While other personnel tried to dissuade him or urged him to send in a D-Class like everyone else, Dr. Ector's response was unwavering. "I have faith in myself and in 999, he said. "If this works, I'll change the world. If it doesn't, sure, I'll die. But what use is a researcher at the SCP Foundation if he can't save anyone?" This proclamation would either go down as a profound statement or famous last words. Dr. Ector stepped beyond the dissenting people and entered the chamber, closing the door and the viewing port behind him. He stood in front of SCP-096, trying to subdue the current of terror slowly rising within him. Was he really going to do this? He reached up and pulled loose the drawstring on the creature's head bag, before grabbing it and carefully sliding it off. He was looking directly at the monster's face. That pale, gaunt visage that had been the death knell for so many others, in a flurry of monstrous screams and roars. But that did not happen this time. The Shy Guy stared at Dr. Ector's face, and Dr. Ector stared back. The creature didn't enter its rage state. It seemed that Dr. Ector had done it. He'd cured SCP-096. He literally leaped for joy, both at his success and his survival. He pulled out a leash that he'd brought into the chamber with him for this very eventuality. Outside, researchers and guards looked on, first in shock, then in horror, and finally in awe. Dr. Ector emerged from the chamber, unharmed, leading the unmasked SCP-096 on a leash behind him. The young, determined researcher had done the unthinkable, somehow neutralizing one of the Foundation's deadliest anomalies without a single loss of life. The SCP Foundation makes a point of emphasizing that it's cold, not cruel. While their operations do sometimes result in the loss of human life, that's never the intention. The same cannot be said for a certain highly aggressive and dangerous group of interest, the Children of the Scarlet King, one of the most successful and organized of the Dread Monarch's many devoted worshippers. While Dr. Ector had been puttering away at his experiment with SCP-096 and SCP-999, they'd been working on their own little project, bringing back the end of the world as everyone else knew it. There are many ways that one can do the will of the Scarlet King. Attempts can be made to spawn him or his spawn into the world directly, and we recommend you hide your daughters if a Scarlet King cult is trying this anywhere near you. Others involve empowering his ancient followers, the Davites, a culture of hyperviolent, monstrous zealots intent on enslaving the world. But perhaps the most simple method of all that one can serve the Crimson Khan is to make the world a little closer to his image, a state of mass death, of desolation, of disorder and primal violence. And what better way to achieve this than collapsing all of civilization and leaving whoever's left to squabble over the remains? It's just as the king likes it. The leader of this particular branch of the Children, High Priest Noah Elordi, had concocted a truly devious plan. An anomalous computer virus that had been systematically affecting various nuclear weapon control systems across the globe, worming its way through countless layers of encryption. The ultimate target was the warhead stockpile of the United States, Russia, and China. With a single push of a button on a control device in his possession, he could bring this pathetic sham of a so-called society to its knees. But as the time to annihilate the free people of the world got closer and closer, High Priest Noah realized a shortcoming in his plan. When the screaming hellbirds came down from above and bathed the world in a cascade of nuclear fire, how would they even know that it was done in the name of the Scarlet King? High Priest Noah didn't just want results, he wanted the credit. This was a complicated plan to put together after all. That's why this devious technopath decided to establish a direct link to the Scarlet King's greatest human enemies, the SCP Foundation. He hijacked every security camera and webcam in the site. The central screen in the Site-19 IT department suddenly shifted, revealing the grinning face of High Priest Noah, with the crimson flags of the Children of the Scarlet King behind him.
Agents of the SCP Foundation, I am High Priest Noah Elordi, Grand Emissary of the Children of the Scarlet King. I am holding the keys to Armageddon. This controller in my hand will allow me to cleanse this world in nuclear fire in the name of the Crimson Khan. But perhaps the inevitability of your demise can be forestalled if you concede to these very reasonable demands.
You probably won't be surprised to hear that they were not, in fact, reasonable. He asked for the release of several dangerous anomalies, particularly ones with theorized links to the Scarlet King, like SCP-682, the hard-to-destroy reptile, and SCP-029, the Daughter of Shadows, among many more. One way or another, the High Priest was going to remake the world in the image of his master, and he gave them only an hour to meet his demands. His eyes and ears were everywhere as the clock ticked. Even with the Foundation's best IT technicians and AICs on the case, there was no breaking through the ironclad layers of encryption that the High Priest had shielded his location in. It seemed that for once the Foundation was at a true disadvantage, and their enemy held all the cards. Researchers and site directors gathered to discuss possible options. With the High Priest's location hidden, there was no way to mount a counteroffensive. There was no way they could release the anomalies that the High Priest demanded without causing chaos. Even if they did, there was no guarantee that the monstrous zealot would be a man of his word and stop the nukes. There didn't seem to be any other options. Until Dr. Daniels, in his containment cell in the bowels of the building, made a suggestion. It was only in a situation this bleak that the ravings of a madman like him would even be considered. There was an entity that, if prompted, would telepathically locate its target no matter where they were on Earth, and would move towards them at incredible speed. Nothing could stand in its way. That entity, of course, was SCP-096, the Shy Guy. All they needed was for the High Priest Noah to see a photo of the monster, and given he had eyes and ears all over the containment site, that wouldn't be difficult. Except Dr. Ector and SCP-999 had neutralized the threat SCP-096 represented. turning it into a harmless creature, and in the process may have taken away the one trump card they had while facing this potential XK class. The poor doctor was soon surrounded by his colleagues who, only moments ago, had been congratulating him on his stupendous achievement, Taming 096. Now they were telling him that he needed to reverse it, or life itself was going to end. He looked through the viewing port into the cross-testing chamber where SCP-096 sat. Harmless for the first time in its long and tortured existence, he had freed it from all its pain, all its suffering, and for now, for the sake of everything, he would need to awaken the monster in its soul once more. And there was only one way he could do it. Now check out SCP-096 is not a monster. And what does SCP-999 do all day, hour by hour? For more,